Welcome to this spotlight on Business Disability Forum's Global Task Force, brought to you as part of Purple Light Up. This is a pre-recorded session, so we shouldn't have any technical hitches, but in case you're wondering about any references to the date, we are actually recording this a couple of weeks in advance. So as a bit of an introduction and to set the scene, Business Disability Forum has 300 plus members, and about half of them operate globally, whether that is truly globally or in some overseas markets, so not just the UK. And to support those members, we set up our Global Task Force almost 3 years ago now, so it's of a similar age to Purple Light Up itself. And we wanted to set it up to highlight the economic contribution of disabled employees and the fact that it's an increasingly global conversation. Our member Shell was very pivotal in starting the Global Task Force, and you'll be hearing a bit from Andy from Shell a bit later. And one of the first conversations I had when I started in post almost 4 years ago was with our key contact at Shell, who said, actually, we really like resources and support that we can use that aren't specific to the UK and to UK legislation, and that can support us around disability inclusion wherever we are in the world, and there just isn't something out there. So I started a conversation talking to some of our partners and said, would you like a group, a network, a task force, something that supports you at global level? Because we were very aware that everyone is very, very busy, and it had to be something that really added value. And our senior contact at the time at GSK, and I'm also very pleased that we'll be hearing from GSK in this session, said, yes, as long as it's not just a talking shop. So it was clear that anything we did needed to be very practical and action orientated. So back in early in 2018, we got the group together and began with what became the Global Business Disability Framework, essentially a global version of our disability standard, reframed as a maturity model, as a practical tool for global D&I leads. And we launched that at the UK government's Global Disability Summit on a boiling hot day in July 2018. And now, 2.5 years later than that, the task force is very well established with 30 plus members, I think, and with our first ever global conference sponsored by Shell taking place in February this year. We managed to sneak it in just before COVID and lockdown really became a reality. So it is a global conversation, but it's also a very small world. So I mentioned Shell and GSK, and I'm delighted that for this session that we are joined by the two Andys, Andy Garrett from GSK and Andy Neen from Shell, who are both pivotal not only as founding members of our global task force, but also are both Purple Space ambassadors. So hello, Andy and Andy. Do you want to say a little bit just to introduce yourselves? Let's start with Andy G.
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks for joining this session, and thank you for inviting GSK to participate and to share a bit about our experience with the Global Task Force. My name's Andy Garrett. I lead the GSK global programme for workplace adjustments, but also our investment towards building more accessible GSK estate. Of course, more recently, supporting employees working from home.
And we'll hear a little bit more about that a bit later on. Thank you, Andy. And then Andy K.
Hi Diane, how everybody, and happy Disability Day. So my name's Andy Neen, I work in Shell, and my day job is I run the talent for our upstream business, but I've been involved in the disability agenda for about the last 15 years in Shell, from creating our first disability network through to the sort of stuff that we're talking about today. So it's a pleasure to be invited and to join you in this discussion.
Wonderful. So great to have you both here as such great friends and partners. I am also joined by two of my colleagues, Brendan and Davina. If you want to say a quick word about a little hello and who you are. Brendan first.
Hi, thanks Diane. Hi everybody. So Brendan from Business Disability Forum. where I lead the work that we do specifically with our members and partners that are global. So I get to work very closely with the two Andys and the other 35 or so members of our task force.
35. Gosh, I lose count. There's new joiners all the time. That's fantastic. And last but not least, Davina.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, hi everyone. Davina, Business Disability Forum, working as a senior business disability partner, supporting our partners across all areas of disability inclusion, and more recently supporting Brendan with the Global Task Force. And yeah, looking forward to working more on global issues going forward.
Lovely. Fantastic to have you both here. Now, Purple Light Up, the actual day that this will be going out on the 3rd of December, also marks Brendan's last day at Business Disability Forum, as he starts his new role at Purple Space immediately after that. So it really is a small and purple world. So we're looking forward to working with you on the other side as well, Brendan, of course. And Davina will be leading the Global Task Force going forward. So we are in very safe hands, and it's fantastic to have you both here. So without further ado, I will hand over to Brendan to tell us a bit more about the Global Task Force and what it's been up to. Brendan.
Thank you, Diane. And, you know, just listening to your introduction there, it is incredible actually how much has happened in just under 3 years. So what else can I add without repeating what you have covered? So we did, you know, I remember that first meeting. So we had just a handful of organizations in the room, under 10 organizations, you know, really there just to explore how can BDF better support its members and partners that are global, because that conversation that you described with colleagues at Shell, you know, we've been having similar conversations with a number of other organizations. It was, you know, we have this commitment that extends beyond the UK, and, you know, we want to develop a globally consistent approach. How do we do that? How can we mine some of BDF's materials, but, you know, how can we adapt them so that they're more relevant to those of us that do have global responsibility? So we did come together. You know, none of us really knew where it would go. We were clear that it must not be a talking shop. So we did focus very early on, like, what are some tangible steps and projects that we can work on. So the first thing that we did do was to look at our disability standard model. So this framework that helps a business to understand how disability impacts on 10 key business areas. And you know, we did some work with the members of the task force so that became a tool that would help people with global responsibility to be able to measure and then improve the corporate approach to disability. And I know organizations like Shell, like GSK and others have really kind of used that tool over the last couple of years to assess where they're at and to develop a more global approach. You mentioned the conference. So, I mean, the conference was incredible. So it stands out in, I think, in everybody's memories as the last time we were together in a big room. Shaking hands and speaking without masks. So actually, the fact that we moved from that meeting of kind of under 10 people to a room full of, we were 150 people there at EY's offices in February was really incredible, and, you know, a real global panel and group of speakers from Singapore, Bangladesh, the US, Geneva, and everywhere in between. And we have also developed versions of our guidance, our best practice guidance now, that have been tailored to a global audience. There is potentially some talk and some work we might get underway in terms of translating some of our guidance. Maybe we might be able to say a bit more about that maybe in the very near future. We'll certainly be looking to take our global framework to the next level. And Davina will be able to tell us more about that. And of course, we published really a groundbreaking piece of research earlier this year that looked at the experiences of over 100 multinational companies and really undertook to understand, you know, what are the challenges to developing a global disability inclusion strategy, and crucially, what has proved successful or helpful for those companies that have made progress. And we were very grateful to Andy and Lynn at Shell for supporting that piece of work.
It was indeed a groundbreaking piece of research which we published in July, although of course this is a strange year and it's really hard to keep track of time really. But it is called Towards a Disability Smart World, Developing a Global Disability Inclusion Strategy. And as you say, Brendan, we believe it is the first and only of its kind. And we were very grateful, are still very grateful to Shell for sponsoring that research and making it possible for us. And again, we managed to sneak it all in before lockdown. So if I come to you, Andy, can you tell us a bit about why Shell wanted to support it and why it's important to you?
Yeah, thanks, Diane. I think you summarised it quite well there. I mean, it's the first of its kind. We were writing a paper that we were going to send to some senior leaders in Shell about what's happening and what the future direction is. And it got us thinking about, well, there just isn't a comparable piece of work out there to say, you know, what's happening at a global level. So it's something that would not only benefit us for what our immediate task was, but we thought it would benefit the wider other companies as well. And it's clearly one of these areas where we learn from one another. There's no secrets, and we're all trying to achieve things and make things better. So that was where it came from, and I think it was really interesting in some of the research that we saw. You know, so that 87% of organisations had progressed a disability strategy, and 81% had seen some improvements, but there was still progress to be made. So it felt like the right time to focus on this piece of research, and certainly I think you've seen from the response rates that there's been pull and there's been interest in this from all four corners of the world.
I mean, there certainly has been, and we had a great write-up of it in Forbes magazine, actually. They were just really, really interested. And there's some great stats you've just shared there, Andy, and I was going to come to Brent to say, if you want to share any more of the key findings for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, just a few highlights. I mean, it was a really kind of deep and wide-ranging piece of research, but yeah, I think one of the kind of key headlines, as Andy sort of alluded to, commitment-wise, you know, increasingly global companies are developing corporate-wide commitments to disability inclusion. And I mean, I guess in some respects, Purple Light Up is an example of that. And so too is the work of the Valuable 500, which is increasingly positioning disability as, you know, a priority for global boards. Kind of underneath that, then, you know, we're seeing kind of, I guess there's a bit of a lag between those global commitments and then developing strategies and programs which will then lead to a more globally consistent experience for candidates with disabilities. So where I think we feel like we're in that kind of that transition from commitment to tangible action. You know, and the reason why that is not an immediate transition is because the challenges are not insignificant. So the challenges that we found were things like, you know, the range of cultural and legal differences between countries, varying levels of progress and engagement with this topic across a wide range of territories, and, you know, the difficulty of harmonizing infrastructure and key policies and guidance documents when you're a huge multinational company. But, you know, despite the challenges, like, there was some really good practice. And one of the things that I think just adds immense value in the report are there are 20 case studies from over 15 global companies. So if you want to find out how GSK are tackling this, how Shell are doing this, and a whole host of others like HSBC, Accenture, and Unilever, and others, you can find that out. So some really positive things in there as well.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and it is available for free to anyone on our website, so do have a look for it. Sorry, Andy.
Yes, I'd say, Diane, if I could just maybe share a few reflections from it myself. I think when we had the launch, or when we had the workshop, one of the phrases that stuck with me was focus on intentions and not perfection. And I think that's really important. I think it's sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming, but, you know, don't be overwhelmed. Start small, scale up. And I think the other learning that I took out of this was just it reminded me that disability impacts every part of the organisation. And how you have to, you know, scale up, but it's important to think about it from multiple different angles. So, you know, in terms of the customer angle, in terms of the employee angle, in terms of the wider counterparties that we deal with outside of our own organisation. So I think there's just so many hints and tips in the report that you can take out and can be used in different sort of phases of the workplace. So it's a great thing to dive in and dive out of.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's been vital to have a global strategy around our disability confidence effort. And I've been doing that now around 4 years with GSK, and I'll talk a little bit about, one of the key work streams around that for workplace adjustments. But, clearly having a global strategy for us at GSK has been, essential in showing the value of disability inclusion across all areas of our business. It's relevant to reaching our patients and consumers. It's relevant to our product development, our research and development, involving people with disabilities, because it helps you to reach your business goals, having a strategic approach. It's not just about the employee life cycle, whilst of course that's important. Inclusion affects all aspects of the organisation. So the global strategy really helps to drive that. And I think the research underpinned the importance of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think one of the things that really struck me when I read the report and on rereading it is firstly the generosity of spirit of everyone in really sharing and really wanting to help others. So Andy Neen talked about sort of it being really practical to dip into. So there's a roadmap in there, and just the kind of collaboration and wanting to share what's worked and what hasn't, and that real honesty as well. I was really struck by that. I was really quite touched by it. I was also really pleased to see that in terms of agreeing with different motivators for disability inclusion, that pretty much everybody saw it was the right thing to do, but they also saw it as good for employees and talent, and good for the brand and consumer and products, as you've just said, Andy, which was just really heartening to see. And the other thing I learned, which I didn't know to my embarrassment, is that there's some countries I know that you can ask about disability and some you can't, and some you have to. And just the difficulty in marrying those things up, and different language, all things that when you think about it are actually quite obvious, that obviously are huge and practical issues for people.
I think also, Diane, just to add to what you're saying, I think it was quite reassuring work as well, I think, for other businesses and organisations who were perhaps at the beginning of their journey, and just the fact that the research was so open and available for other people to learn from, I think has provided a lot of reassurance that, not everybody has got it. We're all on a journey and we're all working towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that it's an early stage for pretty much everyone means that there is also an opportunity for all our members of the Global Taskforce, for any business to actually make a real difference in this space, because actually doing stuff means that you probably are leading, because it's so new.
But Diane, something struck me with the with the research and with the task force structure. Yes, we're all carving our own path, but I think there's a great willingness to share and to learn from each other, so that we don't, fall down our individual, potholes along the way. That we're picking up, key learnings from each other, because that's going to accelerate our journeys.
Yeah, definitely. And that's very much the kind of the spirit of the task force as well, isn't it? In those meetings, It is about sharing really honestly things that aren't working and haven't worked, those potholes, as you put it, not just the things that are all sort of marvellous.
And it was really, oh, sorry, Diane. Go on, Karen.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, really, that's kind of where the research came from, because we'd been having these conversations, these really open, no gloss on any of the kind of presentations about where companies are at, whether it's in terms of the challenges or the successes. But what we realized that after about 18 months, we'd sort of built this anecdotal pool of evidence in terms of, what works and what gets in the way, but there was nothing that really consolidated that learning in a way that a company that's kind of new to this space can just pick up and start to, understand the issues and then start to make progress. So that's really where the research came from, which was about just kind of bringing it all together in one place.
Yeah, if I can maybe just add, I've been contacted by a few organisations who are, looking to or have recently joined Valuable 500. So they made this commitment, to talk about disability at board level, which is great. But then they're saying, well, where do I get started? And at both times, I've just referred them to this report, because it is great. You'll take something out of it that you can action and that you can implement almost straight away. And as we just talked about, recognising that organisations are at different parts. None of us have mastered this. We're all in a learning mindset. And that's a great thing about it. We can all be vulnerable and learn from one another.
Very much so. And I think that sort of leads us on to one of the practical aspects of the research, and quite a big theme in it, around workplace adjustments. And developing a global approach to workplace adjustments was, in the report, was a priority for many of the companies in terms of what they wanted to do first around disability inclusion. And Andy G, I know this is a subject that is very dear to your heart. So can you tell us a bit about what you've been doing at GSK?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've been with GSK now just over 4 years, helping them to drive that global strategy, and I mentioned earlier some of those sort of wider work streams about disability confidence, but a key plank of that for us, was what I came in to do at GSK, was to build an end-to-end user-centered workplace adjustments process that was accessible. And we started, proof of concept in the UK, and we've moved that out, into the US, tested new markets, and we're rolling that into new markets over time. And yeah, we've recognised that there are some challenges along the way, but some key learnings, and I'll call out a few key things. One thing I would say is that there is relevance and linkage to your investment in your accessible estate, because over time, the more accessible, the more flexible your work environments, then less people may need specific workplace adjustment, or let's say non-standard support. So they kind of work hand in hand. You improve accessibility of the work environment, and of course now the work environment is at home, not just in our shiny office buildings, and that's been a key learning point, certainly during 2020. But the actual process itself, we made a conscious decision, when we did the research early on, that we wanted the process to be open and accessible to all. We really didn't want to be constrained by a qualifier of someone with a disability, because that's not well understood by so many stakeholders, who qualifies and who doesn't, who is perhaps disabled enough to warrant support. We swept all that away. And of course, the different legal interpretations and languages used in different markets. So for us, it's user-centered. It's very much productivity driven. It's about equipping people for success. Whilst we might provide quite a high standard of accessible work environment at GSK with the equipment, the tools and the software, that's not going to meet everyone's need. One size doesn't fit all. And of course, you need an adjustments process to provide the solutions that individuals might need if they have a health condition, a disability, perhaps an injury, a shorter term thing, or even pregnancy. So yeah, our process is open to all. It's something that employees and managers, obviously candidates, can ask us for support around finding the right solutions for their circumstances. Another key learning point for us was about central approval. Managers and employees can get bogged down in conversations about spend, and the cost of adjustments. And in fact, most solutions are low cost or no cost, but the approvals process can get in the way. It can get in the way of conversations where employees may be reluctant to ask for the adjustments support that they need, and it can get in the way of managers. So we swept that away. We centrally approved the solutions. We also partnered, so we have a hybrid model. So we've got a small team internally that are helping to resolve the internal solutions, but largely our service is working with a partner specialist organisation. In this case, it's Microlink. So we capture the case, and that goes out, in confidential link to Microlink. They have a conversation with our employee to help them refine the ask to recommend the right solutions for that individual circumstances and work environment. And that might just be a conversation or a more in-depth assessment. And we get a confidential assessment report. So we know that the individual, for their circumstances, need product A, B, and C. Which we can then work with procurement and Microlink to get, purchased, ordered, delivered, installed, and we do that approval centrally. So we do it for the employee and with the manager. So they can focus on their day jobs. Again, it's about productivity. We can specialise in that support process, an end-to-end service line, much like you do with other support around tech support or HR support. This is a specialist service helping people to get the right workplace adjustment solutions. We do happen, after the process is closed, to cross-charge back to the line of business, not to the individual cost centre. But actually, that's an accounting practice at the back end that we don't want to bother employees and managers with, because, again, that's barriers. So, you know, our process, we felt, was we wanted to make it as accessible to everyone. We want people to have the confidence to ask for the support that they need, that they don't feel that they have to qualify in some way as having a disability. It's about what do they need to be successful, to access their role, to be able to thrive in their particular type of work for GSK. So for us, culture-wise, you know, it really fits with our values as an organisation. So we're culturally ready to support people with flexibility in the ways that they work and flexibility in the solutions that we can provide to them. You know, whether it be software or ergonomic equipment, furniture, and those, you know, specialist bits of equipment. But of course, the challenges wise, and you know, they're not insignificant. Working with the supply chain, there are very few specialist suppliers that focus on workplace adjustments. We have looked, you know, that's why we landed with Microlink in the UK, and we've worked with them expanding the service into other markets like the US, large and complex markets. And we'll be working with them going forward into new markets we've got a new three-year plan to roll out into new markets. I think the shift in 2020, clearly, from supporting people at our sites, so whether it be a manufacturing site or a research and development laboratory or even an office environment, you know, it's so many more of employees are now working remotely and from home. So, you know, we learned a lot, and we've shifted that support, so we can support employees with the right ergonomic and equipment and specialist solutions in the home, as well as reflecting the things that they may have had in the office, because what we don't want to do is to store up you know, health problems in the future for employees that are perhaps, you know, we don't want them balancing a laptop off the corner of a kitchen table, you know, hunched over and not sitting in an ergonomically appropriate environment. So we want to support people with being comfortable and being able to access their role. So yeah, it is challenging finding the suppliers in country, but you know, we're all on this journey together. I've been talking with a lot of other organisations, like colleagues with HSBC and Accenture, about what we can do collectively, maybe to look at strengthening that supply chain, so that the volumes, that there's more demand for specialist workplace adjustment support, so that those companies that are providing it can set up the infrastructure in the countries that we need. So it's a really interesting journey for us at GSK. It's ongoing. It's something we're absolutely committed to providing a modern employer, you know, 21st century working environment that is accessible for all. And of course, it's also linked to other work streams of our Disability Council, our strategy around accessible technology, you know, having captioning within meetings. You know, Microsoft Teams has got built-in captioning, and will soon have different language capability within Microsoft Teams captioning, making sure that our, you know, town halls and our events are not only accessible through captioning for people with hearing loss, but they also then work for people for whom English is perhaps not their first language. So we find that some of those solutions, whilst they might initially be there to support people with disability, they have a great value to a much wider range of employees in helping them to be productive and successful at work with the right solutions that work for them.
I think productive and successful are exactly the right words to sum it up, and just trusting people to know what they need and to get it. So it's fantastic what you're talking about at GSK. And before we wrap up, I think Davina is going to tell us what's coming up next in the Global Task Force, and some of that I think is some more work around adjustments, is it not?
It is, yeah. So thanks to Andy, GSK, who has had an interview with us, and you were able to tell us all about the good work that you're doing at GSK. That was much appreciated. So off the back of that, we've been talking to some of our other partners, really interesting conversations around what people are doing on workplace adjustments. So what that's going to lead to is some published guidance, which we're going to be putting out for people to have a look at, which will hopefully just give a bit of guidance as to, you know, where people need to start and what they can do to kind of roll, you know, a workplace adjustments process out across their locations. Another thing we're working on at the moment is a global disability data exercise. So again, we're carrying out lots of interviews, asking our members and partners to complete surveys. It's all part of some research we're doing into what are the main challenges around asking employees to share their data. How do you gather that data? How do you do that across the different locations that you are working in? It's really, really challenging, and our organisations are doing amazing work on this. So again, that's going to lead to some guidance that we're hoping to put out, possibly a webinar as well, just in the spirit of sharing good practice and just helping other organisations to, you know, to carry on good work. We're also going to be looking at our second ever global conference. We're looking at a week-long event, possibly, of different sessions that people can tap in and out of as a result of our members and partners being based, you know, all across the globe. So we want to make it as accessible as possible. Generously sponsored by HSBC, as are the other projects that we're working on. So thanks to them for that. Brendan also talked a little bit about our global framework right at the beginning of this session, which you know, came about just through consultation and discussions with our global task force members. And we think that now might be a good opportunity to start looking at what we can do to develop this framework. How can we make it look better? How can it better serve our members and our partners? So we're going to be looking at doing a bit of research around that and looking at what we can do to just build on the work that's been done and just to improve that framework. So watch this space.
Thank you, Davina. Loads going on, as you can hear, and anyone listening to this who isn't part of our global task force and is interested in becoming part of it or finding out more, please do get in touch. I'm afraid that means that we're out of time for this session, but my huge thanks to the two Andys for joining us, and obviously to Brendan and Davina as well. If you are interested in the research that Shell supported, and why wouldn't you be, because it's fantastic, then the full report and also 4 mini thematic reports and an infographic and a roadmap are all available to download for anybody on our website, and we really want them to be a helpful and useful resource. So do have a look at those. And now it's time for us to hand back to the moderators of this European leg of Purple Light Up 2020, and that's ourselves. So
before you do so, Diane, can I just say thank you to Diane, to Davina and to Brendan for hosting this and for organising this. And as a famous other duo used to say, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from him. And we wish you a great day ahead.
Yeah, we're not quite the two Ronnies, I'm afraid, but the two Andys will do.
The two Andys, two Andys.
It has been a great session. I hope people see some benefit and some value, you know, in the content, and that they go on to look at the content we've referred to in the global guidance, the task force work, the research sponsored by Shell, and so on. You know, it's really helping, you know, global businesses to move the dial.
Absolutely. So happy Purple Light Up, and see you back again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.